Spin Selling was one of the first ever books that I read on sales, and it shaped the beginning of my career and likely thousands and thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of other sales professionals' careers as well. But it's now 31 years old. I was literally 2 when this book was published. And let me give you some context here, because the year that Spin Selling was published, the average house price in America was $60,000. Pubs in the UK were allowed to open during the day for the very first time. And of course, the internet didn't exist at all. So the world has clearly moved on since Spin Selling first hit the bookstores. But should your sales process move on as well? Or is Spin Selling still relevant for the modern B2B salesperson? Because the thing is, a lot of traditional sales trainers around the world are still teaching Spin Selling like it is absolute gospel, like it's the only thing that exists. And sales managers who were taught Spin Selling over 20 years ago are still coaching their sales teams on this Spin Selling process today. So is it all effective? Is it worth using in the modern B2B sales process? Well, stay tuned, because in this video, I'm going to very briefly explain what Spin Selling is and if you should be using it today. Hi, my name is Will Barron. I'm the founder of salesman.org, where we help salespeople crush their quotas. So before we uncover if Spin Selling is relevant in the internet age, let's take a look at the fundamentals of what Spin Selling actually is. Now, Neil Rackham, the founder of Spin Selling, uncovered that top performing salespeople usually asked a series of specific questions in a specific order to get deals done. So SPIN is just an acronym for these questions, and it comes down to 1, situation, 2, problem, 3, implication, and then number 4, which is a bit of a hack just to make the acronym work, need, payoff. So number 1, situation, number 2, problem, number 3, implication, and number 4, need, payoff. Now, situation questions, these are questions designed to uncover our buyers' needs, pains, and their competitive plans as well. So the questions we could ask, for example, would be, who is responsible for XYZ? Why do you do this thing in this particular way? And how important is this thing to your business? Next up, we have problem questions. And with problem questions, we're looking for opportunities where we can potentially help the buyer. So these questions can be, how expensive is it to do 1, 2, 3 thing? Does this process ever fail? And are you happy with whatever supplier you're with right now? And we're already halfway through Spin Selling right now. So now that we've got some background information from your situation questions and you've found a place that you can help your buyer by using problem questions, it's now time to ask what we call an implication question. And implication questions highlight how serious the problem that you've identified for the buyer really is. So we could ask, what is the cost of doing it the way that you're currently doing it? When was the last time, however you're doing it right now, failed? And is this issue stopping you from hitting your business goals? So that's situation, problem, and implication questions. Next, we've got need, payoff questions. And these are what pulls Spin Selling together. It's what makes it effective. Need, payoff questions bait your buyer into agreeing that you, as a salesperson, can help them. And the best way to explain a need payoff question is by running through a quick example that includes all of the previous questions as well. So let's say I'm calling on a VP of sales called Jerry, and I'm selling our salesman.org sales accelerator program. So I'd start with a situation question. I'd say, is improving your performance of your sales team something that's important to you? And then Jerry turns around and says, yes, this is something that I've been thinking a lot about recently. So then I'm going to ask a problem question. I'm going to ask, what's holding your team back from their potential right now? Jerry's going to say, well, Will, I don't think they've got a sales process or a sales method to follow. Next, I'm going to ask an implication problem. So I'm going to say, Jerry, it sounds like without a sales process, a sales method in place, well, it's going to be difficult for your team to scale their sales success. How much do you think this is going to cost you in lost revenue each quarter? Jerry's going to say, I estimate it's going to cost a good 100 grand each quarter that I'm losing because the team don't really know what they're doing, if I'm being honest. So now finally, after those 3 questions are wrapped up, we're going to ask what's called a need payoff question, and we're going to bait Jerry into agreeing that we can help him. So a need payoff question in this example could be, well, if we could teach your team a systematic selling process in the next 42 days using our Sales Accelerator program, do you think that that could substantially drive up your revenue? And of course, to a question like that, following on from the previous questions, Jerry pretty much has to say, yes, Will, you're my hero. Take all my money. Here's a wheelbarrow full of cash. Go spend it wisely. And that's what a need payoff question is. And that's how all of these questions fit together. Now, Sales Nation, does all of this make sense? And I'm going to kind of stop here for a second and just say that I feel with spin selling, you do need to be careful with each of these questions because each set of them can sound condescending or even a bit slimy and manipulative if you use them in the wrong way. But with that said, the big question, is this process still relevant today? Should you be spin selling? Well, the answer is it depends. First off, I'd say spin selling does work, and it's a nice framework if you're brand new to sales. And if you're brand new to sales, make sure to click that subscribe button so you don't miss anything that we've got coming up. There's a few changes that I'd suggest if you're going to implement spin selling in a modern B2B selling strategy. First up, you've got to look at your situation questions because there's new data that shows that they are now negatively correlated to sales success. So the more or worse situation questions you ask, the less likely the buyer is going to open up and actually want to work with you. And this comes from the horse's mouth. So here's the author of Spin Selling, Neil Rackham, to explain.
Today, they're actively, positively, negatively correlated. That is, you ask a lot of situation questions and the customer will become really impatient. They'll say, you should have done your homework. You should have known that. Because a lot of the things that you found out with the spin model 30 years ago, you found out face-to-face with the customer because there was no other way to do it.
And look, let's get real here. 90% of the spin selling situation questions, the answers can be researched online before you even speak to the buyer. And really the remaining 10% of stuff that you'd want to get from the buyer, that can be researched from calling up other people within the account, the end users, someone in finance or procurement. They can give you all of the rest of the information that you need to get the deal done before you even speak to the buyer. And the modern B2B buyer, well, they expect you to have, quote unquote, done your homework before you even speak to them. And why is this? Are they just being arrogant idiots that don't want to share their time with us? Maybe sometimes, but most of the time, I think that you've got your buyers that you're trying to engage with here, right? And there's way more salespeople trying to reach out to them than ever before because you can now sell globally. So prospects that you would never reached out to 20 years ago, you can now reach out to really comfortably. And through the different economic downturns over the years, these individuals are doing more and more and more work, probably for longer hours with less pay than ever before. And so they genuinely are busy if you're connecting to the actual real buyers within an account. So let me say this, if you're not going into your sales meetings prepared, knowing all of this data beforehand, then prepare to have some unsuccessful sales meetings. And finally, problem questions are less relevant in the age of modern B2B sales now as well. In most industries, well, most products are now super reliable. They're affordable and they're somewhat commoditized. Therefore, when you ask a buyer a question like, does this process ever fail? 20 years ago, they might have said, yeah, every now and again, and it costs us a ton of revenue. It's a pain in the arse every time. Whereas now, the answer is more likely to be no. It's pretty reliable, which when you get a no at this stage of spin selling, when you ask your problem questions, spin selling just stops. There's no way to break through this, which is essentially an objection. So what's the modern way? What's the alternative way to ask problem questions? Well, it's simple. Ask your buyer about their future problems, not just their present problems. Because this is best explained with an analogy. So imagine you've just jumped out of a plane, you're falling to the ground and you've got no parachute. Now, after some frantic mid-air Googling, there might be 100 salespeople that you could call that might be able to sell you a parachute. Now, after even more frenzied research, you as the buyer, you uncovered that there's only really 10 salespeople that could somehow deliver on this promise of getting a parachute to you before you hit the ground. And well, mid-air delivery isn't a bad value proposition for these 10 salespeople. They're probably onto something here, because clearly you as the buyer, you falling down from the sky, you don't want to become a flat human smoothie embedded into a random field, right? So the value proposition here is pretty strong. But what's a better value proposition? Well, this comes from the one superstar salesperson who calls you before you jump and tells you that the whole jumping thing without a parachute is a dumb idea and you shouldn't be doing it. And so you need to be this salesperson, this high performer who's asking future problem questions that really add some value to the buyers rather than reacting like everyone else is doing. So yeah, spin selling, long story short, can work, but you need to eliminate situation questions and you need to redefine your problem questions to focus on your buyer's better future. So there we have it. I hope you enjoyed this video about spin selling. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and why not watch one of the videos that are on the screen right now. I always look as if I can see them. Hopefully they're on the screen to my left, maybe your right, who knows. Watch one of the videos that are over there and continue your sales education.